Have you been thinking about getting a Fender Player Series Stratocaster? Well, before you go and get your wallet out and buy it now, or sell all your He-Man collection, what if I told you you could get a potentially equally as good Strat-esque guitar for way less and still have some cash left over to buy stickers?
What more can I say? Here's Jets!
I think you might just find this interesting. It's the Fender Player Series Stratocaster versus the Jet JS400. Two S-type guitars in quite different price brackets. One of them isn't an S-type, one of them is actually a Stratocaster. The other one is an S-type because it's based on a Stratocaster. You see what I'm saying here? You might be thinking, why don't you compare the Jet to a Squire? Surely that's more appropriate. Well, just you wait and see. We're going to go through all the important specs and award points to the winner in each category, and we're going to compare the tones as we go. I've went through almost every important spec with a 15-point comparison. Now, some of these scores are going to be more factual, like one spec might be unarguably better or more premium than the other, whereas some others will be down to your own and my own personal preferences. So your final scores may likely differ from mine's, and if they do, let me know about it in the comments. Or if you'd add extra categories, just in case 15 wasn't enough. Although, spoiler alert, there are some bonus categories at the end of the video. So, let's see who wins. Starting from top to bottom, number 1, Headstock. There's no argument here, the Fender has the definitive classic headstock shape, which loads of other brands have been trying to emulate for decades, with of course the Jet included. The Jet headstock isn't the worst I've ever seen, but you just can't argue with that classic Fender headstock shape design. First point goes to Fender. Number 2, nuts. The Fender, rather disappointingly, has a plastic nut, and the Jet comes stock with a bone nut. Personally, I'm not a fan of bone as a nut material, it's Graphtech all the way for me. But I'm not going to argue that bone isn't the premium feature over Fender's plastic. I also just want to note that all the Jets that I've had my hands on, which is more than a few these days, have all had perfectly cut nuts. That's a point for Jet. Number 3, tuners. The Jet tuners. Unfortunately, these are probably the single weakest point on these guitars. I have to say, I've not experienced any issues with the tuners on this particular Jet, but I've had my hands on about a dozen or so Jets with these tuners and they're just not that great. They feel cheap, they're not smooth, they're a bit grindy, just overall don't function too great. Although you could easily upgrade these to something way better, like a set of Vanson locking tuners for about £30–35. The Fender tuners, by comparison, are way more solid and smooth. They just feel much better quality. They're not the best tuners in the world, they're not like staggered posts or lock-in or anything like that, but they're decent. Personally, I'd upgrade the tuners on both the Fender and the Jet to a lock-in set. But the Fender easily takes this point. Number 4, string trees. Apologies in advance. Rant alert! There should be minus points for both here. They both offer the almost useless butterfly style string tree. At least with the Jet, they include the wee spacer to bring the height up to a slightly better angle. And this isn't surprising on a sub £200 guitar. I mean, it's pretty much expected. But for the biggest guitar brand name in the world, and at this price, Fender should be doing better. Well, at least better than Jet. So Jet takes the point because Fender, they dropped the ball on this one. 5. Necks. They both have 22 frets, they both have dual action truss rods. We've got Canadian roasted maple on the Jet versus maple on the Fender. They're both modern C and they both feel identical to me. Now, I've been saying this since I started reviewing the Jets that these two necks are the exact same profile. But now I can actually show you. And I've also got a 2004 Fender USA standard neck, so I can show you all three of them. Right, so here's the images. Hopefully you can see that they all look almost identical. Showing you them there, the profile at the 1st and 12th frets. Looks pretty close to me. It may not be exactly the same, but trust me, in the hand you would never be able to tell the difference. The Fender has a gloss urethane finish on the headstock and the front of the fretboard, and on the back it has a satin urethane finish. Interestingly, Jet used to do the exact same thing on their earlier runs, but after some customer feedback, they switched to all satin urethane on the front and back, which I think is a better move because it does feel a bit better to me. It's less sticky. So for having the roasted Canadian maple neck with the satin urethane finish all over, this point goes to the Jet. Number 6. Fretboard and frets. They both have the 9.5 inch radius with dot inlays. Now I've already mentioned that the Jet has roasted maple, but if you went for the alternatives of both these guitars, so you can also get a non-maple version of the Fender and a non-maple version of the Jet. In the case of the Jet, you would get yourself a rosewood fretboard, and for the Fender you would have Pau Ferro. It's good to see we can get real rosewood on the Jet. That's going to be a big bonus for some if you don't like the maple, or roasted maple. The maple Fender necks will very likely be a one-piece neck with the skunk stripe on the back, and the Jet's neck and fretboard is definitely two different pieces. So I think the Fender would win on construction, but the Jet would win on materials for having Canadian roasted maple and real rosewood if you choose that option. Roasted maple is also a bit of a divisive spec these days. It's all just a fad like soda streams and haircuts. Personally, I'm completely sold on it. The fretwork on both guitars is almost identical, and I'm actually quite impressed with the fret edges on the Fender. Between 2021 to now, this is the 5th Fender that I've had, and 4 out of the 5 were really poor examples. Sharp fret ends, pools of lacquer on the fretboard. I had to send a couple back and I'd borrowed one that just wasn't very great. But the Jet fretwork is exactly the same as this good Fender example. And like I said before, I've had my hands on several Jets and the fretwork has always been really good, so I'm actually not so surprised by this. A fairly consistent output from Jet. But the final factor that you notice when you A/B these the most is that the Jet has ever so slightly rounded fretboard edges. In comparison, the Fender ones actually feel quite sharp. So in a category that was so close, the rounded fretboard edges tipped the Jet over the top. Another point to Jet. Number 7. The neck heel joints. I'll put the images up on screen. There's no competition here. The Jet wins this category hands down for having one of the best neck heel contours on the market these days. Fender is still putting out their standard block. Personally, I think they should save this block for their Vintera and Classic series guitars and try to move forward a bit with the Player series. The best contour neck heel you can get from Fender starts with the American Professional series, which costs around £1,859. But weirdly, they offer the exact same neck heel design on their Squire Contemporary series, which will set you back £395. So it's hardly a premium feature, is it? Even then, Fender's best neck heel contour offering still isn't as well designed as the Jet's, in my opinion. Jet smashes this point easily. Number 8. Body material. The Fender is made from alder, an integral part of the classic Fender recipe, and the Jet is made from basswood, not to be confused with basswood. That's for making basses. I suppose this will depend what side of the fence you're on the old tonewood debate. If it helps, the Japanese brand Ibanez have been making premium high-end guitars from basswood for decades, and I'm sure a lot of other highly respected brands do too. If you can think of any, let me know in the comments. But alder is most definitely the traditional Strat choice, so a much needed point for Fender. There you go. And while we're at it, speaking about the bodies, I should note two things. First, the weight. The Fender weighs in at 7.9 pounds and the Jet weighs in at a whopping 8.2 pounds. Now of course that can differ from unit to unit. For example, that Jet JS400 Here is 7.4 pounds. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the Jet isn't just some cheap, lightweight budget thing. The second thing to note is the body thickness. One of the reasons that we're not comparing to the price equivalent Squier, which would be the Squier Sonic series, is because these bodies are thinner and lighter weight at 40mm, whereas the Jet is the full thickness 44mm, same as a Fender Strat. Okay, points made. Moving on. Number 9. Contouring. Much like the neck heel joint, the Jet is giving us this extra little cut contour out the back of the lower horn. It's supposed to help with the upper fret access. Does it? But Fender also thinks that this is a good idea, but they save that feature for their flagship American Ultra models, which you can pick up for as little as $2,189 or $2,279 for the Ultra Luxe model. So that's another point for Jet. And it's not so much that Jet are doing an amazing job here. Many non-Fender S-type guitars offer this feature these days. It's more just pure show from Fender, especially when they invented the original contoured body. That's like always been the Strat marketing slogan. But then I suppose if they put the cutaway in that, it wouldn't be the original contour design anymore. Something to think about. Number 10. Pickguards and Plastics. We've got 3-ply pickguards on both. On most other Jet models, I think it's only the black and sunburst one that comes with a torque guard, but on all the other colours, it comes with an aged cream guard that don't match with the knobs, switch tip or the pickup covers. And you also won't be able to fit third-party aftermarket pickguards on the Jet because the dimensions are slightly different and the screw holes won't match up. With the Fender, there's loads more options available, with a more universal fit, because pretty much everything is based off of the Fender design. Point to Fender. Could Fender be making a comeback now? Let's see. Number 11.
11.
Pickups. Okay, so you could say that this part is subjective, but it's just not. The pickups in the Fender player are incredible. The single coils are almost identical to, if not exactly the same, as the old USA Standard series before they changed up to using the Fender Fat 50s. And there's no denying that Fender makes some of the best single coil pickups out there, in my opinion. And they're Alnico 5 versus the ceramics on the Jet. Now, the Jet pickups don't sound terrible, they're actually quite decent for ceramics and for the price. But the humbucker is a bit of a letdown. Sounds a bit dark and muddy, just not very inspiring. So that's another very easy point for Fender. 12. Switching and controls. Both guitars have a 5-way selector switch, working how you would expect on a Strat, and they both have the RWRP middle pickup. So you'll get the hum cancelling in positions 1, 2 and 4, but 1 and 2 is because of the humbucker on the bridge. The Fender of course has the second tone control knob, which is wired to the bridge. The other tone knob controls the neck and middle, whereas the Jet's single tone control is a master which affects all the pickups. So we'll give this point to Fender for offering more versatility. Number 13, the Trem system. They both have 2-point trems, and you're not going to believe this, but in my experience, I way prefer the 2-point trem on the Jet. It's potentially unbranded, or it might be a Wilkinson. There's some speculation on that because it has these WVS branded saddles. They both have big fat full-size blocks at the back, but on the Jet, I actually do prefer the feel and the responsiveness of this trem over the Fender one. The tuning stability is also pretty impressive, but that's probably down to the nut. And finally, the Jet's trem arm is a push-in pop-in over the Fender's kind of old and tired screw-in trem arm. And if you don't have the spring, or if you keep losing it, that could be a bit of an annoyance. On my other Jet JS400, which I heavily modded, more on that later, I put a pretty well respected Goto 510 trem on there, and it wasn't even that much of an upgrade. And by comparison to the Jet stock trem, the Fender trem is fine. Another point to Jet. Number 14, resale value. Common wisdom would suggest that the Fender should retain more value over time, and that's probably true. And if that's important to you, good on you. I'm happy for you. So, point to Fender. I mean, it's good if you're a seller, but if you're a buyer, maybe the Jet's better, it doesn't matter. Now for the final category, number 15, price. Now, I think this is an obvious one. The Fender is priced anywhere between $639 and $659 from most online retailers, or £739 if you buy from Fender.com. And the cheapest I've seen the Jet online is £169, although I have seen it as high as $200. So the Fender is like 3.5 times the price of the Jet. And for what you're getting for your hard-earned cash, well, I hope you worked hard for it. Hope you weren't stealing.
I wasn't stealing!
The Jet just makes too much sense and takes the final point. For value for money, I'd happily spend another £150-ish or more on mods for the Jet JS400, to the point where it would probably beat the Fender in almost every category, maybe except for like brand name and resale, maybe a couple others. In fact, I've already did that, and you can check out a video on the mods that I did to this guitar here, up there. In that video, I put the exact same Fender player single coils in this guitar. So it seems only right and proper to do a comparison video between my highly modded Jet JS400 and the Fender player stock to see if the mods were worthwhile. What do you think? Good idea? Pointless? Let me know in the comments. So who won? Who is the USC, the ultimate Strat champion? In summary, according to my hugely flawed analysis, winning by 8 points to 7 points, the winner is the Jet. Can you believe it? I can believe it. I'm sorry. But that's just my opinion. Which one does it for you? How did you score it? Have you had any experience with either of these guitars? Let me know about it in the comments. Here's some bonus bits that I didn't mention. I was going to add another 5 categories in an attempt to cover absolutely everything, but that just seemed a bit overkill. But here they are anyway. So number 16 was jack sockets. They're pretty much identical. In previous videos, I've gave quite negative feedback to Jet for having a lower quality jack socket, but maybe that's not fair because I was kind of lumping them in the same category as Fazley guitars, which were the same guitar. Long story, I've got a video on up there you can check out if you want. But anyway, some of the Fazley jack sockets failed, but the Jet ones have actually been fine. So number 17, strap buttons, and number 18, back plates. They're both identical. Number 19, colours / finishes. There's of course different finishes available and fretboard woods for both models. Just be mindful of Jet guitars' slightly enhanced product images. The colour of the guitar you get may not quite look like the guitar in the pictures. Number 20, playability. This is pretty much a setup thing. I mean, maybe the Jet would edge it because of the rounded fretboard edges, but you can pretty much set up either of them to your taste and be happy, I think. Right, that's really it this time, I promise. I really did try to remain mostly unbiased with this one. And the weird thing is, I've been a Fender guy for decades, but recently I've been quite disappointed by their output and some of their business strategies. So it can be a wee bit tricky to see past that. Now believe it or not, the Jet is not the best guitar in the world ever. But I think what it really comes down to is that the Jet exceeds expectations, whereas the Fender kind of falls a bit flat. Now, the Fender Player Stratocaster is still a fantastic guitar, but in my opinion, I think it's a bit overpriced compared to the competition that's available on the market these days. I think a good example of these expectations lies in the name. And I'm not talking about the Fender name, I'm talking about how they've called it the Player Series. So this obviously suggests that it's not marketed towards beginners. I'd assume they'd want beginners to look towards Squire. They seem to be marketing this more towards your more experienced player. Yeah? But once again, in my opinion, it feels like it's the Jet that's offering more in terms of specs and even some better features for the experienced player for a fraction of the Fender Player price. If resale value is an important factor for you, then that's completely fair, as long as you're happy.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. Stop what you're doing and listen.
I will be attempting a live stream this year. I'm looking at Wednesday the 20th of December, 6 PM UK time. And it would be great if you could make it. I would love to see you there. So definitely tune in if you want to see it all fall apart. So, if you've liked the video, please do give it a wee like, wee thumbs up. That apparently helps the channel. If you have not yet subscribed, then please consider doing that. And you could do so just by clicking this wee icon here. Just give it a wee click, wee white thing, subscribe, that's you done, you're in the gang. Welcome. Thanks for that. You can always unsubscribe later, but please don't. Okay, thanks for watching. Until next time, see you later.